Well, hey, last week when we were outside, we put a pause on our series about Elijah, but we're picking it back up today. And I'm going to get into a recap about what that's looked like here in a little bit. But I want to tell you about my son, Harrison, because 2 weeks ago, he came to me and he said, Dad, I really want to buy a drone. He had gone to Walmart with his grandma and he saw a drone and he came home and he said, Dad, there's a $20 drone at Walmart. I really want to get it. And he's a negotiator already at 6 years old because he said, there's also a $40 drone, but I'm only asking for the $20 drone. He's trying to make it seem like I'm saving money in this whole thing, which is kind of clever. So he had a doctor's appointment that week. He did a great job. So I was like, all right, let's go to Walmart. We'll buy the $20 drone. And so he got it. We took it home. He has been obsessed with this drone. And he made his first YouTube video. And I want to roll it for you all. So here it is.
Hi, I'm Harrison. I'm going to fly a drone today. I want to be a YouTuber when I grow up. And I'm going to make lots of money. I'm gonna get a $30 drone, but right now I have a $20 drone. Let's see it. Bye-bye.
When his channel launches, you can all subscribe. Here's the thing. This drone is $20. He made that very clear. And this drone, the battery on it lasts for 6 minutes. 6 minutes. It takes 40 minutes to charge. And I thought this was gonna drive him crazy, like having to charge it so long for like so little payoff. But honestly, he's been really great with it. He'll put it on charge. He tells Alexa to set a 40-minute timer. And about once an hour, he gets 6 minutes of fun. It's been fantastic. But I thought he was gonna have a harder time with it than he has because he's growing up in a society that we're all familiar with, which is a society that we so massively desire instant gratification. We hate to wait for anything. We want things now. Fast food, quick service oil change, high-speed internet. Everything is about now. Everything is about fast. So when we find ourselves in a situation where we have to wait, it's easy to end up frustrated. And if you've ever had to wait for anything of significance, man, you know that seasons of waiting are not easy. Some of you have been in seasons of waiting, praying over a situation for an extremely long time. You've been believing for this issue to be resolved for years. You've been waiting for X thing to happen for a while now. And you want to follow God, you want to trust God, but when it feels like that season isn't progressing, or when it feels like my circumstances aren't really changing, I feel like I'm in the same place I was last week, last month, last year. We end up in this place where we're just wondering, man, does God even see me? Is God even paying attention to me? And for a lot of people, I think it's easy for your faith to die in the waiting seasons. It's easy for us to live in frustration. And so the question is, why do we have to wait at all? Why do we wait? Why does God put us in these seasons? Well, the truth is, I really believe that seasons of waiting provide an opportunity for God to do something profound. And I wonder, is it possible that in whatever season of waiting you find yourself in, is it possible that that season is maybe necessary for the season that is to come? Is it possible that it's only in the waiting that we can ever truly learn what it means to fully trust God? We've been in this series about Elijah called Fire and Wind. And again, we took a little break last week, but over these weeks, we've been talking about this guy named Elijah. He is from the Old Testament, and we're just studying his story a bit. And whether you know nothing about him or whether you know a little bit or a lot, the goal of this series is just to look at his life and look at the things that really helped him on his journey and say, can we apply those to our journey as well? And if you haven't been here, I'm just gonna do a super quick recap about Elijah. He was a prophet of God, which just means he spoke on behalf of God. And he lived at a time of a very wicked king named King Ahab. King Ahab was the leader over God's people of Israel, and he's honestly considered to be like the most wicked king that's ever existed over the people of Israel. He was married to a woman named Jezebel, also extremely evil. She was known for killing the prophets of God, which seems to be problematic for Elijah. And so he lives during this time, and they also, Ahab and Jezebel, are having the entire nation worship a fake god named Baal. And so Elijah, he's living at this time, and he's being used by God to do really two things. One, to challenge Ahab and Jezebel's leadership over the country of Israel, and really challenge the idea that Baal exists at all. And so he does this in a few different ways. He goes to Ahab and he says, hey, I'm declaring and praying that there is going to be a 3-year drought over your land. This is essentially an economic death sentence that he's praying over the country to Ahab's face, which is a problem. He's the king and he's murdering guys like him. And so then he also attacks this fake god named Baal. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. And there was a God versus God showdown where Elijah challenged the whole nation that his God, the true God, would call down fire from heaven, to challenge the fake God, Baal, to call down fire from heaven. Baal obviously did not call fire down from heaven because he's not real, and God did. And so he won the God versus God showdown, and as a result, all of the prophets of Baal who were telling people to follow this fake God were put to death. And so this is where we're at in the context of our story. We just finished up the God versus God showdown. And so we're picking up verse 41 of 1 Kings 18. It says, Elijah said to King Ahab, go eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain. And so remember, 3 years ago, Elijah went to King Ahab, said there's gonna be a drought. The rain's only gonna come by my word, Elijah said. And so now the drought has served its purpose. It served its purpose to really put King Ahab in his place. It served its purpose to prove that Baal, who was thought to be the God in control of the weather, it put Baal in his place. So the drought has served its purpose. So he says, Ahab, you can do whatever you want. The rain's coming. The rain is coming. And so verse 42, it says, Ahab went off to eat and drink. But Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel. He bent down to the ground and put his face between his knees. Go and look towards the sea, he told his servant. And he went up and looked. There is nothing there, the servant said. 7 times Elijah said, go back. And the 7th time the servant reported, a cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea. And so Elijah said, go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you. Elijah said, the rain's coming. The rain is coming. And so Elijah declares there's gonna be a rain. He sends his servant up to confirm. And imagine you were the servant, or imagine you're the employee in this moment. And your boss tells you, hey, go look for a cloud. Go look for any evidence of rain. And so you go and look and there's nothing there. And so you come back and you tell your boss what you found out. You kind of know it's not what he wants to hear. He's already declared the rain's coming. But you saw with your own eyes, you're certain there's no clouds, there's no rain coming. So you go back, you tell him there's no rain coming. And he says, go back a second time. And if you like your boss, you're probably like, okay, like I'll go back, I'll look just for you. You know, you've been a good boss. I'll go look another time. I'll confirm it. I'll run the numbers one more time, but I'm just doing it because I like you. If you don't like your boss, you're already fed up right now. That he's asking you to do it a second time when you already saw there's no rain. I see some nods. You're already fed up at time number 2. But the servant goes back, 2nd time, 3rd time, 4th time, 5th time, 6th time, comes back. Elijah, there's no rain. It's not coming. There's nothing. There's not a cloud in the sky. And he says, I need you to go back and look a 7th time. What do you do in that moment? How angry are you in that moment? How many of you would have told him, go look yourself at time 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? But he goes back the 7th time, maybe out of faith. Maybe he was totally buying into Elijah. But he goes back a 7th time and he says, all right, I saw something. It was small. There was a cloud the size of a man's hand. Now, I'm a man, I think, and so I tell myself in the mirror every morning. It's a small cloud. That's a small cloud. He goes back, he says, a cloud the size of a man's hand. And Elijah's like, that's it. That's all I needed to hear. The rain's coming. And some of you have been in a season waiting and you're just looking for a small sign. You're just looking for any bit of hope, some symbol that the rain might be coming. And I do need to tell you that a small sign can be a precursor to a great work of God. And we just got to keep on the lookout for a small sign. The rain is coming. In verse 45, it says, the sky grew black with clouds, the wind rose, and a heavy rain started falling. This is kind of a random story. It's only a few verses long. It comes off of the heels of some really grandiose, bold things that were happening in Elijah's life. A God versus God showdown in front of the entire nation. And now we get this story that's only a few verses long, talking about a cloud that's as small as a hand. But I do believe it reveals something to us about Elijah. We already know he's a man of big, bold faith because of what we've already read about him. But this is something different. To declare something is gonna happen, to believe so strongly for something, and you don't see it. You don't see it not just the first time, but the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth time, you don't see it, and you still believe it's coming. He said, we gotta look a seventh time. See, these few verses aren't about the boldness of Elijah's faith, but it's about the perseverance of his faith, the patience of Elijah's faith. And I want us to ask today, and hopefully learn something from this, how did Elijah learn to have faith like that? Persevering faith, patient faith. And I want to take us back to kind of a fairly insignificant verse. It's kind of an introductory verse to 1 Kings 18. We read it 2 weeks ago. It says, after a long time, in the third year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah, go and present yourself to Ahab. We can kind of just pass over this verse. He's telling him to go talk to Ahab. But the thing that's so significant about this verse is it confirmed really two things for us. Because we also know that in just a chapter before, and we read this, you can read this whole chapter in, a minute. But we know that this is actually 3 years, third year, before the word of the Lord came to Elijah. This is 3 years after the previous time the word of the Lord came to Elijah. In 1 Kings 17, when it says the word of the Lord came to Elijah, leave here, turn eastward, and hide. So at the beginning of this was our first week, he goes to Ahab, declares the drought, economic suicide for the whole nation. God shows up and says, you gotta run. You gotta go hide. He's gonna kill you if you don't. So go hide. And so, Marion, can you put back up the 1 Kings 18, the first where we just were? So the fact that now he shows up and says, after a long time, in the third year, the word of the Lord says, instead of hide, go present yourself. It confirms two things. One, Elijah's prophecy of the drought for 3 years came true. It also tells us that Elijah was in hiding for how long? 3 years. I could also say that Elijah was in a season of waiting for 3 years. Waiting for God to come back to him. 3 years being fed by ravens. 3 years being fed by the widows and the least of these. 3 years fearing from his life that Ahab and Jezebel were chasing after him. 3 years drinking from a brook that is drying up as he sits next to this water. 3 years of knowing that his people are worshiping a fake God and wondering, why isn't God sending me to do anything about it? 3 years frustrated, saying, God, where are you? God, will you come back? God, will you come speak? God, would you show up? Because I'm tired of this season. I've been in it for too long. And why are you keeping me on the sidelines when all this stuff is going on with my people? 3 years of waiting on God, to hear from God, waiting for God to move, waiting for God to do something, anything. And some of you find yourself in that place right now. Some of you have been in that season before. And some of us are gonna be in those seasons in the future. And I wonder, is your waiting filled with faith or frustration? Is it filled with faith or frustration? Because it's easy to get frustrated. Frustrated that I should be further along by now. Frustrated that the dream should have happened by now. Frustrated that I should have been over this sin by now. That I should have lost more weight by now. That I should have a family by now. That I should have a spouse by now. That I should make more money than I do by now. And we have our own expectations around what progress should look like, and we measure our progress against our own timelines. And when that happens, we end up in this place of frustration. The problem is God's definition of progress is always different than our definition of progress, and God's timeline is always different than our timeline. So if you're starting from with a wrong timeline and a wrong definition of progress, you're gonna end up in a place of frustration. And that's most of us. And so instead of waiting in faith, you wait in frustration. And so the question that I just want to cover for the last few minutes is this: how do we wait in faith? How do we wait in faith? The first thing I want to tell us this morning is that waiting seasons are not meant to punish you, but prepare you. I think it can be easy to fall into this trap of I'm only in this season, or I'm still in this season because maybe God's mad at me and he's punishing me because of something I did or something that's wrong inside of me. But I never believe God's heart is to punish. I believe it's always to prepare and equip. My kids recently had a babysitter and were terrors for this young lady. I was so angry at them. We came home from our date night early because I can't even talk about it. I'm gonna skim over the details. So mad. And so we decided to take away screen time, iPads, right? And we took it away. And now if you are screen time parents, you know this is a big deal because you're basically punishing yourself, right? You're punishing yourself as a parent. And I played a lot of catch over these last few weeks without screens. And you could not have convinced me 3 weeks ago to get rid of the screens. I would have told you we needed them. I would have told you they are crucial to the ecosystem of the Newell household. We have to have them. And I'm gonna be honest with you, and don't judge me, we didn't really have limits on our screen times. We're like, just get out of my face, right? Don't judge me. And that was our plan for screen time. And so it was only out of my anger for how bad my children were for the babysitter that I took the screens away. And the plan was to only take them away for 1 week, and we're now, I think, in week 3. And my kids, screen time parents, you're gonna think I'm crazy for this. My kids are happier and calmer and love each other more and playing nicely. And I listen, the non-screen time parents are like, yeah, I told you so. We get it, non-screen time parents, we get it. You're better than us. You're better than us. But they were right. My kids have been better. And it is true that I first took the iPads away as a punishment. But they're no longer not being given, they're still not being punished right now. They're out of the punishment. They're past that point, but we haven't given them back. Why? Because something is changing in my kids. Something has happened in this season. Yeah, I took something away from them that was intended to be a punishment at first, but now something is happening inside them that's preparing them, that's altering them, that's literally transforming them. And I couldn't have predicted that this was actually gonna happen. And so is it true that God will take some things away from you that maybe aren't healthy for you, that maybe you're not ready for, that maybe it's not the right timing for this thing to be in your life? Yes, all of that is possible. Would I define it as punishment? I wouldn't. Because I really believe God is looking at you holistically, knows the entire timeline of your life, knows everywhere that you've been, are, and will go, and he has some things that he needs to prepare in you. And so I do believe God will keep you in a season longer than you want to be there, longer than you think you need to be there, because he's developing things in you that you didn't know you need developed. He's transforming things in you. And if I tried to explain to my kids why they still don't have their iPads, they probably would not understand. And fill in the blank for any way, for any rule you've ever given your kids or any punishment you've ever given your kids. We all know it's only when they grow up that they're probably gonna be able to look back and see, oh, My parents actually loved me. That's why they did that thing. It was out of love that they did this, not out of anger or not out of punishment. It was out of love. And the truth is, God's the same way. God's looking at you, knowing the totality of your life, desperately loves you and wants to make sure that you continue to walk in the fullness of everything he's called you to. And there are things that need to be developed in you that can't be rushed, that take time to mature. I love the Apostle Paul. He talks about this in Galatians. He talks about these things called the fruit of the Spirit. And I love that he defines them as fruit. This is love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. These are things that have to be developed in you. These things can't be rushed in you. And the fact that he calls them fruit is so interesting because fruit take time to grow. They take time to come to maturity. And so the idea that we might be in a waiting season because God needs to develop these attributes in you is absolutely true. It takes time to strengthen your love, to strengthen your joy, to strengthen your patience and your peace and your kindness. It takes time to test your faithfulness, your gentleness. Yeah, it takes time to test your trust. And the only way he can do that is if he puts you in an opportunity to actually test these things, to actually put these things to the test. But here's what I know. When you spend time with God in private, you will learn to trust him in public. And it is only gonna be in this season of waiting that he is gonna have the opportunity to develop some things in you that he could not have developed in other ways. And the key word here is time. Elijah was hidden away for 3 years. 3 years away, he then had the boldness to come and call fire down from heaven. 3 years hidden away, he then had the patience to believe 7 times, look for a cloud. But faith doesn't just appear, it has to be developed in the waiting seasons. Which brings me to the second thing I gotta tell you, that waiting is less about God changing your situation and more about God changing you. Can God change your situation? Absolutely. Does God want to change your circumstances? Yeah. Should we pray, God, can you change and transform my circumstances? Yes. But I have to tell you, he primarily wants to change you. He will rarely change your circumstance without also changing your character. Rarely. Because there is always something that needs to be done inside of you in addition to what needs to be changed around you. And so he will rarely change your circumstance without also changing your character. And so instead, if we want to learn to wait well or wait in faith instead of waiting in frustration, instead of just praying for my circumstances to change, I also need to pray, God, would you change me? God, would you transform me? God, would you challenge me? God, would you prepare me? Because if we look at Elijah's story, little to nothing about his circumstances changed while he was in the waiting for 3 years. If anything, things got worse. Ahab and Jezebel were still killing people. People were still worshiping Baal. Ahab was still king. And you have to imagine Elijah spent some time praying, God, would you take them out of leadership? God, would you show them that you're real and Baal is not? I said this earlier, but God, why do you have me on the sidelines when I could be doing something about this? And it can be so easy to just pray about our circumstances to change when actually that waiting season was meant to change Elijah. It was meant to do something in him. Many of you know this, but my daughter Piper has some developmental delays and a seizure disorder. And we have been praying for years for this to be resolved, to have answers around this. And the truth is, she's in a really good place. We haven't had a seizure since November, thank God. But we're still pretty much in the same place, if Katie and I were being honest. We still don't have answers. She's still on medication every day. While she's advancing in comparison to herself, she's falling behind her peers intellectually. And so we still find ourselves in the exact same place. And we have spent time praying for our circumstances to change and praying for Piper to be healed, which we do still believe and pray for that. We do believe that she's delivered from the seizures, and we believe and pray for that. But more than that, more than our circumstances changing, God has been transforming my home. He has been transforming me. And I have more faith today than I did when she first had the disorder. I have more faith for her healing today than when she first started. I believe Katie has more faith for our family than when it first started. My son Harrison has more faith than when this all first began. And I'll be throwing catch with him, and he'll say to me, Dad, I wish Piper's brain was healed. And I say, me too, buddy. And he says, we should keep praying that God would heal her brain. This is while playing catch with my son that he brings this up out of the blue to says this to me. And this has only happened because we found ourselves in a season of waiting. He's developing into my daughter, who the other week, because we took away iPads, asked her brother, can we go worship in the living room? And they put on worship music in the living room. And Katie was out of the house and I was in another room, and I come upstairs to see my kids worshiping in the living room by themselves. And I'm saying something is happening to my family in this season. And the circumstances haven't changed, but something inside of us has changed. He's transforming us. And I'll be honest, these little moments are size of a man's hand type moments that I see in my home. When he says to me, we should pray that her brain would be healed. When I see my kids worshiping, when my daughter Piper gets a scratch, a cut, a bump, anything on her, she will show it to everybody. And then she also says, but Jesus is gonna heal it. She says it about every little thing that happens to her because God's doing something in my daughter. And I'll tell you, every single time she says that phrase, size of a man's hand, I see a small sign to be a precursor to a great work of God. And it only happens in this season of waiting. Faith is trusting even when you can't see the promise yet. This is by definition, I think, what faith is. Hebrews says faith is confidence when we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Elijah looked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times before he saw the rain coming. And when I think about my family, when I think about Piper, I was praying in year 1, I'm praying in year 2, I'm praying in year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8. How long do you want me to keep counting? 8, year 9, year 10, year 11. I'm not gonna stop believing and praying that she's gonna be healed, but in the middle of it, I'm gonna believe, God, are you gonna do something in me? Would you transform her? Transform my son, transform my wife. I want the circumstances to change, but God, would you do it in me first? Which brings me to the last thing, that patience is part of the preparation. Patience is part of the preparation. How do you practice patience? Really, I just want to encourage you to keep showing up for the battle. I've taught this before, but I think keep showing up is half the battle of faith. If you are struggling in your marriage, keep showing up and don't show up on the app that has other men and women on it. If you're struggling to worship God in this season, keep showing up to church and get around other people who are faith-filled are in this environment, because it will bleed into you. If you feel lonely and you're like, man, I just don't want to be around anyone, just keep showing up to your friends. In text, let them know how you're doing. If you're struggling with forgiving of someone, keep showing up to forgive that person in your soul. If you feel like not praying, keep showing up to moments of prayer. This is so easy to think about with the gym, right? When you don't feel like going to the gym, half the battle is just driving to the parking lot. If you get there, it's like, man, I've already feel like I've succeeded just by getting out of bed. Keep showing up. There's power in it. If you want to practice patience, keep showing up. Because waiting, seasons of waiting don't have to be sit back, I'm just waiting on the Lord. And we'll say that, I'm just waiting on God. But I think it's so easy to mean, well, I'm not doing anything, I'm just waiting on him. But I really believe waiting is proactive, it's not passive. I was a waiter in college, and I was pretty good at it, so if this pastor thing doesn't work out, that's what I'm gonna do. But the term waiter is far inferior to the term server. Because as a waiter, if I just sat back and waited for the people at the table to come to me, that's not gonna be a very good day. But I gotta be proactive to go find out the ways I need to serve these people. And I believe in a season of waiting, sometimes we sit back and we just say, man, I'm just gonna wait on God to do something. And yes, we are waiting on God to do what he can do. But also when it comes to you, I need you to be proactive in your waiting. and keep showing up. Keep showing up at church, keep showing up to pray, keep showing up to serve, keep showing up for your family, keep showing up to your job, keep showing up when other people expect you to actually give up. Keep showing up. Because it's only in that moment, it's only in that place that you're gonna show up and your patience is gonna pay off, and that day's gonna come 3 years later that God's gonna show up, and he previously was telling you to hide, and today he says, go present yourself, because it's a new season is on the horizon. Last thing I just gotta tell you is waiting is worth the wait. It's worth it. It's worth it. And some of you have been waiting for some really important things. Me too, I'm there with you. But it's worth it because you get taught some things, he develops some things, he transforms some things. You might not ultimately get what you ultimately want, but I believe God will always give you what you need. And I believe if you wait proactively instead of passively, you will end up in a place where you receive 100% more of him in your life. And so if I can encourage someone, keep waiting, keep waiting, keep waiting. Believe in faith, believe he's gonna change your circumstance, believe he's gonna change you, and believe that you're gonna come out on the other side stronger, better, healthier, joy, peace, patience, everything developed in you so you're better prepared for when this season actually does come on his timeline. Amen. Let me pray for us. Jesus, would you teach us that waiting is worth the wait? God, that in that season you can do some things that you can't do in other seasons. Would you transform us? Would you teach us what it means to trust in you? Would you teach us what it means to lean on you, to believe for more, to believe for better? But God, would you teach us to trust in your timing, that your timeline is better than my timeline. God, and that your definition of progress is better than my definition of progress. Would you teach me what it means to wait in faith, to wait proactively, and to give me the strength to just keep showing up. Father, I pray for everybody that's in a season of waiting right now. Father, would you give them renewed hope to wait in faith, renewed strength to get up each day and show up for themselves, for their family, for you. God, renewed expectation that you can do the impossible in their life. And God, will we keep waiting, God, that you would do what only you can do. We'll do what we can do and you do what you can do. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, come on, let's stand to our feet. We're gonna sing.